Welcome, Corona Del Mar project.
When and where were you born?
Okay, I'm a native Californian. I was born in Oxnard. You know, that's down the coast. Never lived there. They just happened to drive there because the doctor was there. So, and then back to LA. So I grew up in that area, or this area, and I was born in July 1928. So that makes me 85 and a half.
What were you doing before you entered service?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I was actually, before I had to go into service, I was home in summer vacation from college because after high school, then I started junior college. And then when I was home from summer vacation, it was 1950. And the war broke out, that is the Korean War, in June of 50. So it turns out that I missed World War II just barely. So what happened then, when the Korean War broke out, I was on the front end of the list, the draft, you know, they had a draft then, where they draft people. So I was right on the front end because of missing World War II. And I had a friend, a girlfriend that worked up in the draft board in Santa Ana. So she called me where I worked down there in Newport Beach. I was working at a boat shop. And she said, hey, I want to give you a heads up. Your draft paper's coming up in 2 weeks. So she said, I'll just let you know. So I didn't want to be drafted and go in the Army. So I joined the Air Force that in September, you know, of 1950. But of course then I couldn't go back to college because I had to go in service.
If you weren't going to be drafted, would you have joined the military?
Yeah, well, if I had just waited in another 2 weeks or 3 weeks from the time I talked to the gal, then in the mail would have come a notice, report to the draft board, you're being drafted into the Army, the U.S. Army. And so then that would be, you don't have a choice, that would have been it.
Did you make any lasting friendships throughout the war?
In the service?
Yeah, in the service.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, there was, the guys I can still remember to this day, you know, I don't see them that often. Well, some of them are dead, but I mean, what I mean is, there's only one that I knew really that lives in the area where I see him. The others, you know, New York and all over, but we made some really great friendships, you know. Because, you know, the conditions over there initially were pretty rough. Okinawa was the last major battle of World War II before they dropped the A-bomb. And that island, when I got there, that island was practically blown off the face of the earth. I mean, you know, it was just mud. I mean, the roads were just deep in mud, and all the palm trees were shattered, so it's a pretty bleak place. Now it isn't. It's actually a resort. But then it was just really a pretty bleak place to be living during that period of time. So anyhow, you make a lot of good friends when you're, you know, in trying conditions and stuff.
Do you know anybody prior to going into the service?
Oh, anybody that was in?
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a good friend of mine, in fact, my best friend I grew up with, he was 6 months older than I. So he did get caught in World War II. So, although not very long, because he went in and the war ended a short time, he had it whipped. Because he got the GI Bill and all the benefits, but he didn't have to go to Europe and fight or anything. So I knew him pretty well. He was in the Navy. So when he'd come home on leave, even as a short time, when I was still, you know, in college, yeah, we'd talk about stuff and service and all that. And then I had another good friend that I went all the way through grammar school with, and he was in the 40th Air National Guard of California, and they were sent to Korea immediately when the war broke out, but they weren't really trained. The Army and Air Guard, they didn't have the training for the conditions over there. I mean, the winters and the jungles and all that. So he was dead 2 weeks after he got there. They wiped out his whole outfit. He was dead. It lasted 2 weeks because they didn't have the right equipment. they weren't trained and they just got obliterated, you know. So that's a couple of people I knew. I knew a couple others.
How did you stay in touch with your family and friends during your service?
We wrote just, you know, hard letters, and they were delivered by mail, you know. We had what they called an APO address, and then so they would write. In fact, I wrote every day. I wrote a letter to my, because I said I was married. I wrote a letter and mailed it to my wife in the U.S., and then she would write a letter. So I would get, you know, like, of course, sometimes they'd come 2 or 3 letters at once, but we each wrote each other you know, a letter every day. And then I later saw her in Japan before I shipped back, because when she graduated from Stanford, she went to work for the Atomic Bomb Casualty Commission in Washington, and they were doing research in Japan, in Hiroshima. So she actually got a contract job in Japan. So when I got a rest leave, when you're in a combat group, you get a rest leave every 6 months. Then I flew to Japan and spent a week with her where she was working, and then fly back to Okinawa. So that was pretty unusual.
Where were you when the war ended?
Okay, when the war ended, I was, let's see, 53. Okay, I was stationed in the Mojave Desert at what they call an aircraft control and warning station. So I was out in the Mojave Desert. And so when the war ended, I tried to get out early. I applied for an early out, but the commander didn't want to let me go, so I had to stay in until my
Do you have any like big readjustments to civilian life?
coming back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, because I was on Okinawa, you know, for 19 months, which is a pretty long time on an island like that. And when I came back, the people in the U.S. were so tired of World War II that the Korean War was like, not to them, wasn't like a war, even though there were 7 times as many guys killed in there as there is in Iraq and Afghanistan put together. So when I came back and I was in uniform, going a couple places, people kind of looked at you like you're a loser. I mean, I felt like, I thought, Jesus, I just spent 19 months of my life over there, and the people, I mean, they didn't say it, you know what I mean? It was just, that was a feeling. And I was kind of, you know, bent out of shape, not bent out of shape, but I thought, God, I give up my college, I go over there, and some of the civilians, they just treat you like crap, you know. And so it was kind of disappointing. Of course, I get over that, you know.
Yeah.
And I mean, even to this day, I don't hold any ill feelings like that. But at that time, after 19 months, you get at a young age, you sort of get like what they call island fever. You know, it's kind of a shock to come back, because it's so different and bleak, you know, over there compared to here. So that was it.
Do you think that that's still an issue with soldiers who come home today, or not as much?
No. People today, and particularly in the last, I'd say the last, even as recent as the last year, I think people have more respect now for the guys that are fighting in these wars, which are somewhat questionable to a lot of people, as you know, Iraq and Afghanistan. But, you know, they're coming back with serious injuries, having trouble getting work, psychological problems from the devastation that they've been living in. And I think people now are having more consideration and respect for the people that are in the service today. And I really feel that's great. In fact, when I go to the VA Veterans Hospital, because I have a hearing problem and I go there to get hearing aids, you know, they're really treating the veterans a lot better now than they were. I mean, really significantly, and I think that's great.
Was there any like major experiences during wartime that affected your life?
I wouldn't say affected my life, but I mean, I grew up a lot by being over there and seeing things. But I do remember I worked with a guy over there in the intelligence group, and he'd been there. He was there when I got there, and I always remember. I don't know. The way I grew up, our family had we went to church and we had a fairly positive outlook about things, and we believed in higher powers, and stuff. Anyhow, this guy, his name was Wiley Wright. One night about 4 in the morning, I went into the shower. The shower is like a concrete room. I mean, it's not like a. And he was sitting there on a wooden bench with this, it's like this. See? I said, "What's the problem?" And he says, "I don't know. I just feel like I don't have anything to live for." Well, I know this sounds funny, but I mean, that kind of an attitude, I did. I said, "What do you mean?" I said, I don't know what are you talking about? You don't, can't, I said, somebody's to take care of you and this and that. So anyhow, it was then that I learned that, there's other people thinking a heck of a lot different than I am about life in general. So I can remember that to this day. So it's kind of a different experience. Got over there, we were flying daylight missions. But the problem is we were losing a lot of our airplanes because the Russians provided MiG-15s. That was a fighter, a jet fighter, to the North Koreans through China. And so this airplane had great fire control at the end of World War II, machine guns and all that kind of stuff. But the MiG was so fast, which they didn't have in World War II at the end of the war, that when the fighters would come after the B-29, it was hard to track the MiG with machine guns, and so we were losing a lot of airplanes. And so about 2 months after I got over there, we stopped flying daylight missions because the losses were too heavy. So then we started flying nights. We had to paint the 29s black underneath, so when they used searchlights, the searchlights couldn't lock on them at night, so that the MiGs could see where the planes were. So that helped knock out the the reflection from searchlights. Okay, that's a load of typical 500-pound bombs. This was one of the generals. Okay, this Quonset hut. Over there in Okinawa, they get typhoons, same as they call hurricanes, and I mean they're pretty bad. So these Quonset huts have cable go down over the top of the hut and concrete bunkers on each side to hold them down, because when the winds got up as high as 170 miles an hour, everybody, nobody's walking around out there. You got to be in something that's stable. Okay, this is getting ready to load bombs on racks to pull them up in the bomb bays. Oh, this is another airfield we're knocking out a runway.